Hi, I'm Tom Richardson, Bibliographic Manager for BookNet Canada. I'll be captioning my slides for accessibility, but most are just text. You can assume that if I say next slide without a comment, that's what they are. That being said, I'll be annotating slides verbally, so the transcript would be recommended for hearing impaired use. Also, I'm assuming you know something about book metadata and data exchange practices. If you have any questions or need context, please email me. And while I'm clearly referencing ONIX for books, I think most of the points would apply to any book metadata system. To introduce the topic, let me say that this is something of a quixotic presentation. I want you to look at metadata differently. I intend to define the quality in metadata and try to demonstrate quality as I define it solves business problems. I'm going to let you know how you'll be rewarded if you dare to try. I'll provide 3 use cases. The last one is one where you may be losing money. It's a tall order. But my first slide is the saddest term in metadata: benchmarking. Next slide. Starts by reviewing its entry from the International Institute of Business Analysis Babok Guide, version 2.0, which states its purpose as benchmark studies are performed to compare the strengths and weaknesses of an organization against its peers and competitors. Next slide. And it provides the description which goes on to clarify. Benchmark studies are conducted to compare organizational practices against the best-in-class practices that exist within competitor enterprises. The entry is longer, but that's the gist. Next slide. When data producers talk about benchmarking metadata, they normally focus on requests made by end users. Who uses what and how do they want it? The logic is that if it isn't loaded, no one supports it. There's never a point in doing it. End users don't really think in terms of benchmarking metadata. Accepting metadata isn't that sort of decision. But they focus on making sense of the data they receive, which is a mirror of the data producer's focus. Both look outside of themselves for validation about what they should do or not do. Next slide. Identical metadata cannot be traded using multiple trading partners' definitions. It's a contradiction in terms. But metadata can be traded to multiple partners by using the standards definitions. Any business decision to use a standard should include the decision to use the definitions of the standard. Okay, an example. An EPUB check is done against the EPUB standard, not against the most common not-so-bad practices. An EPUB file may well include workarounds to support specific readers, but they are understood as the fault of the reader, not an equally valid way to present the standard. Metadata should be no different. Next slide. Metadata's meaning comes from the standard's definitions, not from how it's used or requested. My next slide has the 2 words that represent the core of the solution. Naming matters. Now, I use the Babok definitions, not because I believe that anyone had been trying to use the formal definition of that when they were saying benchmarking metadata. But I do want you to think about what you're doing. And standards, Babok or ONIX, uses careful language to create clear definitions. They aren't starting points for negotiations. Your business probably does define many things in slightly different ways than anyone else. But you map is the usual term, your data to a standard using that standard. Next slide. Don't say Flavours of ONIX when you mean expensive proprietorial data request. Naming matters because you need to name the problem accurately to solve it. That's the focus of the Babcock Guide, naming and subdividing, patterns and processes, to improve business and its functions. Saying Flavours of ONIX blames a metadata standard for the Indian industry practice of implementing other companies' requests or basing their ingestion entirely on what's given to them. Before I define metadata quality, I'd like to review a use case that shows we have options. Next slide. So this is a book cover from a book published by Porter Germain Press. A girl in profile features on the left, with a strong diagonal bisecting the book cover. On the right, a dominant series title, A Girl Called Echo, Volume 2. At the top in small script, the book's title, Red River Resistance. And at the bottom, the author and 2 illustrators. Now, I chose this book because it's a poster child for publishers promoting the book series over the book's title. But P&M's metadata was cleanly done. Series title was handled on its own, unique from the product title. Further, all of the data, physical and digital, was handled identically. A central data set is almost a certainty. I looked to see what happened at online retailers. Next slide. And this is what happened at Kobo. I'm showing a screenshot of the book's page there. Cover on left, price block on right, book's title center, it has prominence, but the series name is labeled, highly visible, and appears below the authors. Both author and series are links to listings. Further down the page, still above the fold, in this series, where very visibly volumes 1 and 3 appear, an actual series listing on a book page. I have looked on this for retailer sites forever, and I have never seen this before. Next slide. This is the same page, but below the fold. There is a more by this author with 6 books showing expandable to show 6 more. Impressively, the series entries aren't repeated in this section. Based on seeing this, I went back to the metadata to confirm that Porter Germain Press fully supported by the same author entries in related product. Interestingly, when I check the author's name link, Kobo returns a slightly different list. I also noted that P&M's related product entries were consistent for use of in the same collection. My point in all this detail is that Kobo is doing complex programming using both the publisher information and its own data in the creation of this book record, as well as its supporting listings. It's not a casual undertaking, and the programming shows thought and backup, but it also includes support for the correct use of the standard. It can be criticized. There's no author bios provided. That's a really sad omission, and I expect that will come. Now, I sampled the usual list of online sites, and no one else managed to do this series entry this well. Most of the retailers just didn't display series, but then most publishers duplicate series in the book title. So that's a choice to avoid an ugly duplication. One retailer didn't display or index series. Now, publishers like to blame retailers for poor support, but this too can be a choice. Some publishers only supply the series name in title. There is no data trail to know what the series is, so indexing across multiple entries is incomplete. Retailers are trying to curate a user experience and don't like to be blamed when expected data is missing. Simply providing nothing is not something I'm quite willing to defend, but it is a plausible business decision based on the inconsistency of publisher data. Now, the very large retailer who pioneered putting series name in bracket was the most peculiar of this. There was no consistency, though series was there. Site to site, format to format, the display varied. Now, please remember that publisher was consistent. Now, to that retailer's credit, the digital products were consistent, where my guess is the display is driven by the ebooks metadata, not by the publishers. And who knows, Kobo may be gaining consistency by doing that as well. Next slide. Nothing stops companies from systematically refusing to implement a portion of a standard. Standards are particularly vulnerable to requests from or received wisdom about large players. In the case of series metadata, there has been such systematic abuse over 15 years that it's doubtful any one company can be assigned any blame. But most of the effort by publishers was done to fix the data on that very large, but curiously inconsistent retailer. It's a drain on everyone's resources. I see no evidence of benefit. I will say the problem was facilitated by almost every other retailer in North America avoiding the obvious by not using series data as supplied in the standard as their default. Naming matters because if the companies who felt it was necessary to abuse the standard to achieve a goal did it knowingly, named it as out of standard, they could at least engage in a dialogue with their peers and the standards community about that. Instead, their choice was to cherry-pick the standard and its definitions. And I guess, say multiple flavors of the standard exist. I can only make a big call out to Kobo for their audacity in programming to the standard and their use of the granular data supplied by the publisher, and to Porter-Germain Press for their best-in-class, consistent support of granular data done to a standard. These two should talk about supporting promotional headers. And by the way, this is what happens just all the time in Catalyst every day. And it already supports promotional headers. Next slide. This slide provides the definition of quality metadata. Getting the results you want. What? You thought it was more complicated. Well, it is. This doesn't consider that the value of metadata comes from it being traded, so next slide. Definition of quality metadata. Getting the results you want by trading for it and delivering what's needed. The metadata needs a trading partner who is also getting the results they want. Next slide. The real definition of quality metadata is meaningful communication. The supply chain is just a rom-com full of strife and missteps until the players realize that they both want the same thing and a contract and profit ensues. Now, I just heard someone mutter something about when was the last time their so-called trading partner gave feedback. Like never. Naming the problem is always the first step in its solution, and you can tell this is the right definition because it helps name the problem. No one can make you talk, but next slide. Editor is like the best friend who has your back in the rom-com. ONIX for books, acknowledgement, format, specification. A means to trade information to support metadata trading, including two-way communication. We cannot make you talk, but we can prepare the way for you to do so. And by the way, Amazon has stated their intent to start using this tool as part of their transition to ONIX 3.0. Next slide. My second use case is an example of unintended consequences in keywords as meaningful communication. When my colleagues in Catalyst heard that my topic was data quality, the first thing they said was, "You gotta talk about keywords. It's bad." This is something I've heard consistently from retailers. Keywords would seem to be something publishers provide to improve search. So what goes wrong at Catalyst? Next slide. Harry Potter and COVID are now ineffectual searches. Author searches return comparable authors. Entries need careful study to determine irrelevancy. Processing includes pointless repetition of indexed entries, series, author, title, audience, and subject fields. My next slide is just my own confusion talking. Does it make any sense to supply keywords to trading partners that are designed to manipulate consumer search results on a specific retail site? Can you manipulate Amazon's search meaningfully, given that it has the world's most developed and complex consumer data underlying it, and that keyword creators can only access a small portion of it? Next slide. I can speculate that retail search optimization may belong with the site owner and not with their data suppliers, but I can confirm that search degraded on BNC Catalyst when keyword searching was added. Now, the next slide is the cover of a BISG publication from February 2018 called Revised Best Practices for Keywords in Metadata. And I just want to cite it as containing a lot of good advice on keywording. It's really not my place to say how keywords should be developing, but I think the focus on Amazon is troubling from a data quality perspective. And it seems that keywords is the new all-in-one solution. If you can't stick it in title, then stick it in keywords and your sales will improve. Okay. I don't want to blame publishers for how they use keywords. They're doing what they can to increase their sales. Next slide. Data quality, when defined as meaningful communication, would include retailers being clear about what they index to support search. Good quality metadata should offer a reward. And that brings me to the next slide. I should say that the slide offers a visual pun. I should say that the slide offers a visual pun aspect in that the word small data is in the smallest accessible size and is dwarfed by the rest of the text. Specific, directed, findable, and fully accessible as uniquely identified data points. Next slide. Small data as an aspirational definition. Small data is when a specific data point appears on less than 10% of the books in an aggregated database, but more than 90% of the books in that aggregate carry more than one of these small data points. Okay, that's an aspirational definition, not a practical one. I'm critical of keywords, but they would seem to represent the ultimate piece of small data, as they are uniquely chosen to represent the book. The difference with small data is you don't know why the keyword is there. It's a mulch that can include references designed as clickbait squatting in the middle of a database. Your data is mixing with all the other choices made by less able firms. Small data comes unique but identified. It always pertains directly to the book. It's another way to say granular data. And it's the antidote to the problem I began with in benchmarking and naming matters. The problem cited there was data producers focus on requests made by end users. Who uses what? And how do they want it? And end users only interrogate the data they receive. That's a loop. And it's a loop that can only find data in volume. Data creation and use done that way won't find small data. The little bits that give distinction and meaning that actually drive discoverability. which is what publishers seem to want from keywords. Next slide. Keywords are a poor substitute for small data. Thema, a structured, predictable subject system of great nuance, would provide far better support for the use of small data. Certain types of books have needs. On gross terms, or by gross definition, we deal with these using audience codes. Educational books come with different expectations. Children, young adult, and trade have different needs. Then we dump them in the same aggregated metadata bin and ignore the differences, supporting each as much like the other as possible. So we can be sure the data is used, that data will be supplied. And then we wonder why diversity is poorly supported. Supporting small data, granular data, is part of the answer. Next slide. Small data is diverse, unique, and distinguishes books from each other. I am almost done droning. The last case study is depressing and might result in loss of revenue for Canadian companies. Next slide. Does Canada represent a distinct market? Canadian metadata regularly does not supply or supplies partial market information. Next slide. Some common and convenient metadata choices that blur market differences. Publisher sales rights statements are used to cover distributor rights, not assigning distributors with a territory. Supplying both Canadian dollar and US dollar pricing to exclusive distributors of only one of those markets. Not applying price territory. Inconsistent territory statements that don't carry any logical pattern for that product. Next slide. Automated processing of Canadian metadata by major US wholesalers and distributors has resulted in them assigning Canadian rights to themselves. This is something we can document in BiblioShare and that BookNet has found as creating problems when we're helping clients. What should be US-only data comes back to us or to the supply chain as part of US-Canadian feeds. That's different from saying anyone is actively selling it, but may well lead to bookstores ordering from those US sources. What Canadian companies don't supply can't be processed by any data aggregator. Don't tell, don't get. Now, I should be clear here. I do not see this as evidence of malfeasance. Graham Bell of Editeur likes to point out that companies that load metadata will interpret ambiguity to their advantage. But Canadian metadata is often absent, not just ambiguous. People are supposed to know, but automated systems aren't people. Next slide. The transition to ONIX 3.0 is an opportunity to solve this. ONIX 3.0 provides for and expects greatly improved market statements. Next slide. Each Block 6 product supply represents a unique market and should include a market composite. Its AAA support can include a market-specific publishing status, a market-specific publication date, a market-specific embargo date, which you get in 2.1, but whatever. It's still in 3.0 too. These are all things identified by Canadian publishers as needs, and their lack of support as a problem and an ongoing source of issues. So this is great news. Anytime you need a different date or status in your US or Canadian feed, there's a simple solution. Make it its own market. And everybody supplying or loading ONIX 3.0 should be looking for that information in their corresponding market statement. It's like the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Only good can happen. Next slide. Of over 300,000 ONIX 3.0 records in BiblioShare, less than 10% carry the expected market composite. 59% of the supplier roles, a mandatory data point in ONIX 3.0 that's needed to make sense of supply details, are coded as undefined. So, while ONIX 3.0 represents an opportunity to solve this, the actual data in BiblioShare tells a different story. Less than 10% is how I defined small data and an atypical diversity value that's typically missed in data loading. And supplier role has to be the simplest possible thing to update in the transition from ONIX 2.1 to 3.0. It's a piece of data that literally is the same on every record. A publisher's relationship to their supplier is well known and easily described. Even the most cursory viewing of the intent of the changes made in ONIX 3.0 will confirm that markets are important. ONIX 3.0 is a different mapping than ONIX 2.1, and those differences should be respected. Now, the next slide starts with a poor attempt at humor intended to leave a slightly less bad taste. It's an XML joke. Tag mandatory. Attribute rank equal high. HTML bold. Please! Close bold. Close mandatory. Please plan on improving your data in the transition to ONIX 3.0. Please act as if the Canadian market exists in your metadata. Now, my penultimate slide is a summary of things to do. Do your own mapping. Know how your business needs are communicated in any standard you use. Make sure staff doing data entry have access to the full ONIX code lists, including their definitions. And know which map, where. Benchmark your needs against the standard as well as what your trading partners support and request. The last slide completes the list. Add small data values that reflect your business. Let your trading partners and standards organizations know what you support. Let your trading partners and standards organizations know what you need. Expect your trading partners to do the same. And my closing slide is just my email address, which is trichardson, one string, at booknetcanada, one string.ca. And I'm Tom Richardson. Thank you.